Hi, I'm Femi. Okay, today on the stream, deadly monsoon flooding in northeast India and Bangladesh has left more than 9 million people in desperate need of shelter, food and water. People in South Asia are having to cope with flooding, extreme heat, landslides and drought all at the same time. So we are asking, is climate change making the region unbearable? We start with flood survivors in Bangladesh.
I received some dry puffed rice to eat in the last few days, and my house, it was swept away to where we don't even know.
We stayed in our flooded home for 1 week. Now we are staying at a shelter, but there is no food. Today the water has receded a little, so I hope to go home soon.
I have never seen this type of flood in my life. The 2004 flood was big, but not like this one. My house is still under waist-deep water.
Joining us to talk about the ongoing floods and the impact of extreme weather in South Asia, Pavni, Ritu, Sharaban. So good to have all three of you with us. Pavni, please say hello to our international audience who may not recognise you from your reporting in floodwater. Go ahead. Hi, Pavni. Please introduce yourself. Hello.
Hi.
Tell everybody who you are, what you do.
I'm Pavni Mittal. I'm the correspondent for Jazeera here in New Delhi. And over the last 1 month, our team has been to the state of Assam in India's northeast, which has seen 2 major rounds of flooding.
Okay, we'll hear more about that in just a moment. Hello, Ritu. Please introduce yourself to the stream viewers around the world.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ritu Bharadwaj, and I'm a senior researcher with Climate Change Group at International Institute for Environment and Development.
Good to have you. And Sharaban, welcome to the stream. Thank you for bringing your expertise to us. Please say hello to our audience around the world.
Hi, everybody. It's Sharaban Tahura Zaman. I'm an environment and climate justice lawyer based in Bangladesh.
Good to see you. Okay, so we have 3 experts who can tell you about a very unpredictable monsoon season that we're seeing right now. If you would like to talk to them, you have questions, you've got comments, jump onto YouTube and that comment section is live. I am just looking, Pavni, let's start off with some of your reporting, some of the pictures that you sent us on my laptop. Can you talk us through the pictures just very briefly? Let's start with this one where you're on the river. Here on my laptop, there we go. What are we seeing here before I move on to the next shot?
So this is a rescue mission that we went on. That's a military boat. And the water that you see, it looks like a deep river, but it's actually fields that have been submerged. And on that, the water was about 15 feet deep in many areas. If my math is correct, that's close to 5 meters, if I'm not wrong.
That's extraordinary.
So it is pretty deep. And those fields are livelihoods of thousands of people.
Yeah, I thought that you were on a boat going down a huge river. So we've got more pictures. There are more because I want you to keep saying on my laptop. Here we go. Look at this one here. Where are we here?
That is a road that runs through a community, a locality in Assam. And yeah, that is river water, fresh river water. While walking, it was very difficult for me to walk because the currents were strong and you could see everything that you see in river water. We saw fish, we saw all kinds of insects, there were snakes, and the water was in people's homes, again, knee deep, and people were living like that.
So Pavni, in a former career, I would tell people, forecast the weather, and we always told people never to walk through floodwater because it's dangerous. Is there an option in the regions that you went to?
Not at all, because, while rescue missions, and you saw the final picture there, those were going on. The fact is that this is rural India. A lot of people there are farmers. So they're very attached to their land and they're not comfortable leaving. So many people we spoke to preferred to live in flooded waters. I mean, I remember snakes right there, and they were okay with it. I mean, I don't want to glorify that, but the fact is that they preferred living there in those conditions, just hoping the water levels would recede and they could
Okay. Pavin, we'll come back to you because you're breaking up a little bit, but I understand where you're taking us. Ritu, I want to bring you in here because monsoon season, you see a lot of rain, you do see a lot of flooding anyway, but this is unusual because why?
Okay, so the thing is, we are experiencing new form and type of climate impacts that we've not seen before. So countries and communities are facing increasing frequency and intensity of the same event, like floods or droughts or sea level rise, that they were experiencing before, and then they were capable of handling them. But right now, what they're facing is unprecedented. They've never faced that before. So I'll just give you a few examples, like the Bay of Bengal, the coastal areas of Odisha or in Bangladesh. They used to receive one cyclone in 2 years. Now they receive 2 cyclones in 1 year. Tavni was mentioning Assam itself had one major flood in May, and now there's another major flood. So what happens is the communities are hardly able to recover from one event, and they are faced with another event, which means they're in the constant process of recovery. You can never think of going back to the same level. Same is in the case of sea level rise. We often in India, people don't realize that climate impacts are not just cyclone and floods that you can see the impact of. There are a lot of slow onset event, and I'm sorry to use that technical term, but slow onset events like sea level rise, and it is happening. Normal general public, they don't understand. I've been to Odisha's Kendrapada hardly 2 months back, and there's a group of 7 villages which is already underwater, and the villages where our study area was, they used to be in that area 2.5 kilometers away from the sea. Now, till last year, they are 1.5 kilometers away from the sea. And in due course, they are going to go underwater. Similarly, in Bangladesh's Uri Shahar, we did a research last year where we saw that every family had undergone displacement at least 3 to 11 times. There was a family.
In what period of time, though, Ritu? How many times have they moved in a year, in a season, in how long?
So in a period of last 5 to 6 years, they have moved at least 3. And there was one woman which really moved me. She had 7 sons, all the 7 sons dead. And you can imagine the scale of impact it is having. And I can keep going on. These impacts are not, when these events happen, we typically call them as climate change loss and damage. And I'll just quickly explain what loss and damage means. Loss is something that you lose forever, like sea level rise. All those villages which are underwater, they're lost forever. They're never going to be reclaimed back. Then there are damages which are still salvageable, but yes, there is a trail of damage. People are suffering losses. And when I say that, these loss and damage are not just in economic terms. It's not just loss of infrastructure, loss of homes, loss of crops, livelihood. They're non-economic losses and damage because they're children who are suffering mental trauma and anxiety because of these events. They are women and children who are forced to live in temporary relief camps. And our research 2 years back showed that when in Assam flood itself, there were all the women and children were targeted by traffickers. So trafficking increased in the aftermath of. So
Ritu, I'm just going to put pause on you for a moment because then you're talking about the ripple effects of having to leave your home multiple times because of extreme weather, and then what happens then. But I want to bring in Sharaban before we get there, if that's okay with you. Sharaban, Roxy Cole is a climate scientist, and we're looking at this situation with an erratic monsoon and thinking, what is going on here? Roxy summed it up in a nutshell, and I'd love you to build on what he told us earlier. Here's Roxy.
The most particular change in monsoon patterns is that instead of having the rain spread throughout the season, moderate rain spread throughout the season, now we are having long dry periods intermittent with short spells of heavy rainfall events causing floods.
Monsoon and a drought. Let me just go via Sunita, who's an environmentalist here on my laptop. Flood at the time of drought. This is the story of climate crisis and why we need to get very serious about managing scarcity and excess water. It's almost unthinkable, even from, say, 10 years ago. Sharaban, please pick up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important issue that it's flagged up. I mean, I just want to mention here, like in Bangladesh, what happened in May. May is not our monsoon time. Monsoon is supposed to start at the mid of June and it continues up to September. But this time, monsoon started way early during our summertime, and it's not only started early, and we also faced our first flood at the end of May. And with a very short period of time, the community faced second hit of the flood at June. So see, I mean, what the previous panelist was talking about, the sudden onset disaster, like the disaster that you are not prepared at all, there is no early warning, nothing, and all of a sudden the disaster is there and your whole life is devastatingly affected. So 2 floods in 1 month, and not that it's not within the season. One is at the summer and another is at the very beginning of monsoon. It's kind of a devastating situation for a community actually to cope up. Another thing I just want to add here, like why these things we are trying to refer in as a frequency and intensity. Because last time, especially in northern eastern part of India, they suffered flood in 1956. After that, they suffered in 95, which means after 50 years. After that, now they are suffering it in 2022, means after 27 years. See, the time length is getting reduced. And also, the level of water is getting way higher than the expectation. Yeah. I mean, for sure, for India and Bangladesh, flood is nothing new. We live with the flood.
Not.
But this level of intensification and, I mean, the frequency that's we never experienced with our infrastructure, our community's capability, nothing is actually aligned with this to deal with this kind of flood. That's one thing. Another is regarding the reference of loss and damage. The key part of loss and damage is that gives a very clear indication. I would like to refer the IPCC's report, sixth assessment report.
So Shahban, I'm going to slow you down a little bit. Loss and damage means that the rich countries in the world that cause the climate change have to pay up. It is not a popular idea with the rich countries in the world. There's a lot of pushback about that. Shahban, would you just briefly make your point? Because we have audience on YouTube who want to talk to you as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to add about the loss and damage, it clearly says like you are no longer in the position of adaptation. You don't have that capability of adaptation. That means this is a permanent damage that you are going to suffer and you are going to carry it in the rest of your life. So that's why when we talk about loss and damage with the community who have no contribution in this problem, but they are suffering, they are paying the most. And that's the point we trigger the developed country or the highest emitter country who contributed the most and have to take the liability and responsibility for making.
So Shahban, let me just ask you this very directly, very candidly, and then Pavni, you come in here. Which countries who are responsible for climate change are actually saying to Bangladesh and India, let's help you with how you cope with these extreme flooding? Can you name a few countries, Shahban?
From the loss and damage context, it's very unfortunate, no.
None. None. No. All right, Pavni, go ahead. I've got some YouTube questions for you. Go ahead, Pavni, go ahead.
Yes, I think what became clear in the course of our reporting is that what's happening in Assam is sort of a microcosm of what many developing countries around the world are or could be facing. It's a tussle between developmental pressures and climate change. Because look,
Pavni,
local experts did tell us that caused by human intervention that have sort of caused this problem, all of which are exacerbated by climate change, which is something that countries like India and Bangladesh have contributed very little to.
Pavni, can I ask you some questions from YouTube? I've got one for Pavni and I've got one for you, Ritu. Yeah. Pavni, our audience watching right now, did the flood affect densely populated areas such as Dhaka or just the rural areas of Bangladesh and northern India?
Well, you know, I mean, both. In fact, a lot of areas that were affected were areas that were not equipped to be to sort of combat this or address this problem because they hadn't seen this kind of flooding. So we went to cities, we went to towns, and we went to more far-flung areas But at the end of the day, the fact is that when we spoke to officials, they said that while they have stocked and they are doing evacuations and relief distribution, they simply didn't have the resources to sort of help as many people as they wanted to. Not everybody could make it to relief camps, and not everybody got more than 1 square meal a day, despite the government giving in a lot of relief.
Ritu, let me bring you in here. I've got a question for you. This one comes from Ashan909. Why can't the politicians focus a little more on making lives better for people in India, I'm going to add, and Bangladesh, rather than having useless debates that arouse violence? If they use their heads and develop a good drainage system, these things would never happen. Ritu, is that possible? Can a good drainage system solve extreme monsoons?
Honestly, I'll just say yes and no to that answer, to that question. So firstly, yes, politicians and the policymakers can do far more than they're doing right now. We know that climate change loss and damages are occurring. These events are becoming more and more frequent and intense, and all the panelists have been mentioning that. But what we really need is, we've seen from Odisha's cyclone Amphan and other cyclones that occurred in both in India and Bangladesh, because there was a very good early warning system, at least lives were saved. Whereas in case of flooding or drought system, in fact, India does not have a drought early warning system. And I'll explain to you, as because we do not have early warning system for drought, it is increasing in its impact because it acts like a slow poison and a silent killer. But having said that, one, you need to be more prepared. The policymakers need to have early warning system, take some anticipatory measures, because clearly the level of climate impacts that are happening now, we can't prevent it. It's clearly beyond the limits of coping capacities of community.
I want you to say that again, because when we talk about climate crisis, the climate emergency, the deadline for pushing back of when it will be too late, I think that climate scientists are being generous because they don't want to scare people into inaction. They don't want to debilitate the world. But really, when we're talking about India and Bangladesh right now, Ritu, please reinforce what you're saying. Shahban also said it a little bit earlier, but I want our international audience to hear it loud and clear. Go ahead, repeat it, please.
See, what has happened is, because there was so much of debate and discussion around climate justice, about compensation, that we lost focus from loss and damage. These events are already occurring on the ground. It's not that it's not, because it's for the first time that loss and damage was even mentioned in negotiations properly. That was in last year's COP.
Richie, but no one is paying up. They're 20, what is it? Is it 10 years behind? They're 15 years behind? Do you remember the Paris Accord, that agreement? Everybody was like, whoa, we've saved the world. Not enough, but a little bit. And all of those promises made in Paris, and people were excited, and this is for our grandkids, they paid not a single penny.
And you see, Fahmi, the problem is, I'm not even going into the direction of climate compensation and climate justice.
Is this the only answer then?
Talking about, No, what I'm purely talking about is communities and countries right now, they're suffering from these impacts. We need practical solutions for them. Okay. Practical solutions could be simple.
Name one, because I'm going to bring Shahban in here. Name one practical solution. Ritu?
Practical solutions could be, there could be some areas which are increasingly becoming uninhabitable.
That's what we asked at the beginning.
To safety. To move people to safety, take anticipatory measures, move people to safety, because those areas are not going to be habitable anymore. Then take some early
Ritu, so we're saying move people to safety so they move out of where they're living right now forever. Evacuate.
Yes, that's the only
climate
solution
migrants.
Right now.
All right, okay, got that. I want to share the conversation. Ritu, you're so much knowledge you're dropping on us right now. I need to share it with Shahban as well. I'm going to go, though, via Dr. Malancha, because where we are now needs more planning than we're seeing on the ground. This is what she told us earlier. And then, Shahban, please pick up. What do we do? First of all, Dr. Malancha.
What we need is a long-term adaptation plan for the region, and most of the efforts have been directed towards providing immediate relief for the people. What we need is some kind of long-term planning so that we are not only better prepared, but also we are able to protect lives and livelihoods. For instance, ministries of animal husbandry, agriculture, health, they all need to be working together consistently to make sure that there is no outbreak of disease after the floods. The livestock can be moved even before the flood strike. So more than immediate relief, we need to now focus on long term.
Shahban, please pick up.
I just want to add 2 points here. I mean, first of all, if again, the IPCC report clearly said like we are soon going to breach the 1.5 degree goal by this decade if we are not going to reduce our greenhouse gas emission. The second point is regarding the long-term strategy. I just want to ask a question to the audience and also to the panelists. I'm a Bangladeshi, I'm a smallhold farmer, and I lost my land and everything, and now I am kind of forced to move to India. So when I'm moving to India, I become an illegal migrant. I'm no longer a Bangladeshi. I'm a climate victim and I'm an illegal migrant. I lost my identity. What solution you are going to give me? My occupation is lost, and there are so many uneconomic loss and damage, and how you are going to address these loss with the long-term strategy and all other efforts.
Shahban, can you tell us, because people are watching right now and saying, what can we do? What needs to be done? You articulated so beautifully what the issue is. It's that there is lack of planning, lack of preparation, and now the weather conditions are so extreme that it's really difficult to cope with those weather conditions. What needs to be done?
First of all, we really need to address and acknowledge the loss and damage that is happening at the very ground level. And then based on that, we need to come up with a solution that can go with the community's need. Of course, we can think about sustainable infrastructure, better drainage system, and other facilities, but we need to think about the need of the community who is forced to migrate it from one place to another, or maybe from one country to another. But first thing we need to keep in mind, what is their need? Because the loss they are suffering, that might not be able to be adapted, might not be able to be adjusted. In that case, we talk about the compensation.
Okay. These are difficult conversations. Ritu, just do excuse me, because Shahban mentioned the community. You go to the community, what do they need? I am going to end on the community. We started with those voices of survivors from Bangladesh's recent flood. I'm going to go back a few days to Pavni reporting. And what comes after a flood? After a flood comes disease if you're not ready. Here's Pavni reporting in the field.
Binita Rajbangshi and her daughter have been staying in this relief camp for 4 days. They were forced to flee when water gushed through a window and flooded their home. She says she caught an infection from the dirty water.
We are facing many difficulties. I have barely slept since we moved to this relief camp. We are very tense. Even others are also losing their sleep.
Hundreds of thousands of other people have also been displaced by heavy flooding in Assam state in India's northeast. Darang district is one of the worst affected. More than 4,500 people here are living in relief camps. Heavy rainfall in the hills is bringing more flooding in areas like these. Floodwaters are blocking major roads and preventing trucks from bringing supplies. People here say they are struggling to get food and medicines.
Pavni, in the last 1 minute of our show, so I'm going to ask you to be very brief. How are people doing? This is going to be everyday life now. Monsoon season, drought, floods, landslides, etc., etc. How are they doing? Are they ready for this?
No, they're not. What we saw and what we reported was stories of helplessness, of devastation. We spoke to people, while talking to people, women broke down. They didn't know what to do with their children. There was fear of no drinking water, no supplies. That is there. But I do want to end on a hopeful note. We were talking about...
Thank you, Pavni.
Preparation, and authorities say that they are trying, and that is a project that the Assam state is looking into.
Ritu,
but again, as Sharaban mentioned,
thank you for being part of the stream today. We really appreciate you. I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.